And with that, I would like to introduce the members of the committee. To my far left, we have Senator Carl King Neighbors. To his right is Senator Dennis Mandela. I'm Donald Manglonia, Chair for Fiscal Affairs. And then to my immediate right is the Vice Chair, Senator Karina Magofnia. Also joining us in this committee, we have our Senate President, Edith De Leon Guerrero. And assisting the committee, we have our Fiscal Analyst President, Dave Demapon, our legal counsel, Joe Bermudez, our IT manager, Jonathan Diaz, our LA, Joel Intagable, and our Sergeant at Arms, Brendan Manglonia. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Committee on Fiscal Affairs meeting to discuss House Bill 2395. Before we proceed, can I get a motion for the adoption of today's agenda?
Seconded.
All right, motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comments. And I now open the floor to any member of the public who wishes to make comments today. Please state your name for the record and the entity you may be representing, as well as if you can keep your responses to a limit of 5 minutes. Floor is now open.
That's the agenda.
Sir, you may begin.
Hafre and Mangutin, and good afternoon, Senator Carl Neighbors, Senator Mendiola, and Senator Magofnia, and Senate President. Good afternoon, and Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to. First of all, Mr. Chairman, how many minutes do I have before I proceed?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. You remind Mr. Chairman, if you can allow the Sergeant at Arms to just look at me like 1 minute so I know exactly when to stop,
Sure. I will give you that leeway.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. Like I said earlier, Mr. Chairman, is that I wish the Speaker of the House and his Gestapo groups will allow us to practice First Amendment when we're doing public comment, because it's quite difficult to explain a huge bill like this that was passed in the lower house without more time to explain our position. But for today, I'm going to be submitting later on my first time official comment to so that it could be official record, not only on the testimony on live in public. And I want to thank the Senate President for allowing us the last time additional 5 minutes. But anyway, first of all, my name is Richard Antalan Hofschneider. First of all, I just want to reiterate on record that I'm not an enemy. I'm not a Northern Rounders descent. I'm a Tototano, the indigenous people that have lived here for thousands of years. And we are claiming that under this Sinamay Constitution, I am claiming personally, and of course, as a part-time advisor for the Matua Council, we are not covered after the covenant was signed. So the legislature, this honorable body, we must look into this issue that we're raising, an issue that is has to be addressed in the covenant. Hopefully, the 902 would, the Governor Palacios, if he's listening, and Delegate Kilili would put this as an issue to discuss with the United States government, because under the covenant negotiation, we can negotiate mutual consent, certain provisions of mutual consent, I believe 6 to 8, the legal counsel would probably clarify more. Then we can put that and once and for all address this issue. I totally oppose this 15 million loan that the lower house approved for several reasons, and one of the major reasons is this money, this trust fund has been over since 1983 up to now 2024, estimated at close to 80 some million plus interest. We're estimating, excluding the MPLT trustee. that we have I believe now it's 100 and the MPT trustee would clarify that, but I believe it's 107 or and I want to make sure that this this bill, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, uh, we need more public hearing. Go to the islands and talk to the beneficiaries, so Totano, and hear them what they have to say, and see if that this position that we're taking, or I'm taking, and many members out there are supporting us, and we're signing again on this this Saturday from 7:30 to 11 at the Sablo Market in front of the farmers market to petition that the this earned interest that is coming annually from MPLT should be directly deposited to every individual Totonu qualified individual net to bank. So we it's time that the entity of the Sinai government, with the request of Arno Palacios, the governor, should be set aside and divert this money, because we all know that inflation is the cost of living is growing, and the wages are low and maintaining, and the economy is not in a good. Based on my reading, the economy is not really in the proper recovery yet. And I noticed that the Senate President have come out to address the issue in the federal level, which is a good move, Mr. Senate President. And but the bottom line is, there's several issues, and one of the major issue too is the DPL. Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of concerned that. Just respectively recommended that the DPL secretary should be here, former Senator Santos, to be here to testify too, because right now we don't know, as beneficiaries out there, we don't know really what's going on with our transfer of money from DPL to MPLT trustee, and we haven't heard anything about the Attorney General's Attorney General and the public auditor that MPLT requested via Attorney Robert Torres. And we haven't heard anything. All we know is that there's a conflict, and also one of the major thing with the Department of Public Land that is affecting the interests of our Totano land is the appraised value of our land, and we should be looking at how they calculated our appraised value, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, and also too the issue of the investment, the investment, the money managers and the financial consultants. We have to look into how they decide this investment, because we've been there more than 80 to 90%, if we're on island, to listen carefully, Mr. Chairman, how they decide. I'm not a financial analyst, but I've learned a lot from just listening to the trustees and to the legal counsel and the financial to how we transfer this money. So the bottom line is that if we have more money coming in from Department of Public Land transferring into the Maran's Public Land Trust Fund, we have more money to invest, and that's one of the factors that really is affecting our what's called annual earned interest coming over here, from my understanding. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, do spec bring next time the DPL secretary, so we can iron this out publicly, so the beneficiaries can hear what's going on with those, and not just on the newspaper, because the newspaper, it's all up to the Marans Varieties, Happen Tribune or KSPN to really interpret what they say during the deliberation. So at the same time, I would like to have Governor Palacios personally to withdraw this request, and like the Matua Council President, Ms. Liana Hoff-Schneider, she said that this is the wrong place, the MPLT is the wrong place to borrow. Either it goes to the Commonwealth Economic Development Authority, and just this morning I've read the original Maran's Public Land Trust, Maran's Public Land Corporation, how they were initially the constitutional issue, how they created that in order for them to transfer those millions of dollars from the U.S. Department of Treasury to our government. So lastly, at the same time too, I would like to have the Governor Palacios and the Speaker of the House and Senate President to ask the Congressman clearly, Mr. Chairman, because he's still there up to January, to ask this Department of Commerce to waive what they're asking for, So because we're part of the United States and under the covenant, section 701 to 704, there's a mechanism in there, and the attorneys would probably advise you on this, that we can request directly to the United States Congress And the United States Congress can request the President of the United States, the State Department, and the Department of Interior to request them to waive this, to waive whatever this, the panel that you're requesting. And lastly, before I stop, Mr. Chairman, and this committee, I read one of them, the chairman, trustee, Mr. Philip Mindiola Long, the strict fiduciary duty that are mandated on the trustees is number one, to analyze, number two is to formulate, and number three to implement, and lastly to monitor. That's the summary of his interview way back several months on Moran's Variety, and I just remembered reading that. And I don't know how Mr. Chairman and this honorable committee would come up with a public law that will meet their fiduciary duty. And I believe that as far as we are in this situation, Mr. Chairman, honorable committee, it's not going to meet at all. Even if the Senate passes this and the House passes this and the governor signs it, I don't see anywhere that they would meet. And we're going to monitor all the way up to the entertainment of the Maran's Public Land Trust, because without DPL Secretary, without MPLT, Attorney General, Public Auditor sitting here to resolve the cloudy issues about these reasonable expenses under DPL and reasonable expenses under MPLT. And other than that, I truly oppose this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator King Neighbors, Senator Mendiola, Senator Senate President, and Senator Magofnia, and legal counsel. Thank you, and Mr. Dave Demapan. Thank you for this testimony, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Hofschneider.
Yeah.
It's already on. Half a days and good afternoon. It's on. Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman Manglonia and members of this honorable body. Nu Gohu Siliana Manglonia Saman Hofschneider, Gaigi Zugini, Quentutazi, Matua Council for Native Chamber Advancement. Utunga naman ako desta ita yun man mapos no tibina nakuko sa parewa posisyon no i posisyon mami sa sangan na isalapi esta maktu tempo na isalapi debut no fan maatan do fan manai idueño ni man gay salapis desta i tempo maski 48 años za debi i manga idueño ni mangay salapis ang mangay tanu ufan maatan inidalalnya so fan manai sa pagona tempo tamana sangan si Richard makarelilala no i otro na sa pabifaisi namzu na por favor atan totti i covenant sa stabula uungo mapapat sa totti amininti nga logo of importante na maatan totti i intention i covenant beripita talo i covenant agua probenizi i covenant a faisin na debi na i malog no constitutional government or create a development bank no through that time ma create i EDLF and timan familiar nisti no gisti economic development loan fund morph gigato para Commonwealth Development Authority Pago recently Commonwealth Economic Development Authority gizezu na oficina ma nai no inkodgo na todi gobyerno ang nasisita of na salapi pa infrastructure pero ano watugwi currently economic SIDA no Commonwealth Economic Development Authority and it stand to be corrected guaha invest bonds para infrastructure za guaha siya interest no based on that bond no hasta manasesserbi za edzigi isaipan na Northern Ireland Legislative Delegation na salapi siya appropriate para infrastructure para villages precincts and loki para tinian zan luta no enigi na manera gobyerno necesita ano so biragi totigen no na lugar senigi sta maprobinizi za mga manalati intention ni Maran's Public Land Trust isalapi naman manai po fan mainkotgo minados no apatsa si Richard no na debi magay no gaigi sekretary ni Public Land gini Jan i manmagas za fan maupiam zo kabalis ni i offer na no na mafatinas i Public Law 15-2 is on your purpose and finding zan i legislative intent sa i kiniprendek ko 15-2 guards on your legislative intent lo makontradisi i legislative intent makontradisi lokwe i ginagago gi covenant sa ni constitution i mamanda edzu na debi na transfera i salapi pago na ora i Department of Public Lands under i executive branch agogoti mizon put mizon gi time certificate of deposit zan mizon put mizon gagi gi pa i opisina niya kada sakan mana oluma courtesy information para i legislatura no for reporting purposes sa lo ti matutugi offer no za i minananda gi magoy na $4 million and makolek $4 million kana hamalalat sa ito $4 million importante nin atan no sa gof importante sa antisinya ipap tisinya manufactu ulo Kimarans Public Land Trust sa lapi ni kagi Department of Public Lands tisinya Marans Public Land Trust ana holo mestigi maluk secured bonds ni para sinya manggogo manuli mas high yield interest za taigwi zugini testigi zo ko specialty lo at manzo matatsum maski desanyos matatsum zigi Marans Public Land Trust meetings zo watan i differential of the mano ni paron fangana mas bula na interest za station na sa lapig imagay man ma-short change it sa ani bangko pompega pa time deposit kasi 4% na interest yield. So I think Marans Public Land Trust siguro kinimprendek ko gwa naman marukoy 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up to 13%. So no malago zo na por favor ajuda governor za no in na fanyuli sa lapig isida za man mafatumagi bula na federal officials za go personally bi fanagan para federal officials gi Washington DC sa gwasya no utungo gi US Congress currently za bi fangogo azudo para 97 million of the mano na no sinya man majuday ni para makubri idzi ginagago na manasisita 15 million sa 15 million gi budget the Department of Defense is not only chump change it's fananyazi anong to stipend crumbs no not in that context law and no Department of Defense is on a budget pago $800+ billion utungwa na sila man mazuda to that respect si Zusmasi sabi na alam ko official no comment para amzo
Thank you, Ms. Hofschneider. For the record, we have Senator Selena joining us on Zoom. Floor is still open. If there's no one else, we now move on to the next item on the agenda. Under new business, we have House Bill 2395 HS1. It's to repeal and reenact Public Law 23-12 and for other purposes. Before we invite the entities that we called upon to appear before the committee, would any members like to provide any comment on the legislation? All right. If there's no one else, may I invite the MPLT Board of Trustees Chairman, Mr. Long, Secretary of Finance, Ms. Tracy Narita, CIP Administrator, Ms. Liz Balahaja, to join us in the chamber. Before we go into any discussions, would any of you like to provide any statement in regards to the legislation that's before us? If there's none, the committee wanted to invite all the involved parties to discuss House Bill 2395 and to determine the whether the amendment made by the House has any effect on the current public law in the regards that the main amendments that were made were under the findings and purposes, which, as we know, have no effect on what the law intends. And so, maybe my first question to MPOT is: do you have any concerns in regards to the House bill that was passed?
Yes. We had offered an amendment. We actually offered Section K. I don't know, Chairman, if you got a copy of that, but I sent that last night. I believe I sent it to Jude. He was the one that sent me the original draft yesterday. So we had our legal counsel review it and then offer a Section K to him last night. And that K basically just takes the findings and purpose language and puts it into the enabling body of the legislation.
And was that the only section that MPOT is proposing to amend?
No, sir. We actually offered an additional I or L, I'm sorry. And L would include MPLT and the legislature authorizing the same type of agreement to be entered into with autonomous agencies. There's a little bit of lack of clarity on the legislation and whether the legislature understands that the administration is requesting MPLT to provide loan advances to autonomous agencies as well. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear in the language of the bill as well.
Okay. So just those two sections is what MPOT is proposing.
Correct at this time. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Long. Secretary Tracy, do you have any concerns in regards to the House version of HB 2395?
No concerns in regards to the House version. I would like to ask if the Senate amendment has been introduced or if there is an updated copy that we can see.
Right now, the only updated copy we have is what you see on screen. Jolene, can we print out 2 copies? And so while we wait for the copies to be made to provide to the secretary, I would like to open the floor to any members for their questions. I recognize Senator King Neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to everybody today. Thank you for making time to be here. I was wondering, do you guys, CIP, do you guys have a drawdown schedule for these projects, an itemized schedule of how you guys intend to draw down on the funds if approved?
Yes, we do have a projected drawdown. We've developed it and and have turned it into MPLT. Do we turn it into the legislature?
Would we be able to?
Yeah, and even to the legislature.
Would it be possible that it be made available to the committee? Because I don't think we have anything in our possession.
Sunny, actually, we made a hard copy, so if we can make copies here for everyone.
Oh, we can email it. Yeah.
So also in our previous dialogue, there was mention, of course, funds that were, or projects that were possibly able to be funded through through this mechanism for the islands of Tinian and Rhoda, and I was kind of curious as to what the parameters are with EDA. Are all of the grant monies already accounted for? How would the projects from Tinian and Rhoda be inserted?
Senator and Mr. Chair, and members of this committee, the way our projects, CIP projects, whatever grant, we do, we submit applications for a particular project. So to answer your question, the projects in question now do not have any for the islands of Tinian and Rhoda. And the request for this MPLT is for projects that have already been granted by EDA.
Senator Carl, you still have the floor. Thank you. I recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again. So just looking at section L, and as I read through that section, I would like to first ask whether or not the central government has agreed to include autonomous agencies on this line of credit agreement. So we need to establish that first before we pull them into this agreement, right? So is the central government in agreement that they will also include autonomous agencies in this line of credit? Because initially I thought it was just for CIP projects that is with the central government, but now I'm seeing this. So I would like to hear from.
Senator, to answer your question, in our proposal to MPLT, it included all projects that were approved and funded by EDA. And so some of those projects are with the autonomous agencies, NMTI, PSS,
Got it.
NMC. And so we are only proposing financing for specific projects to the autonomous agencies. It's not open for any CIP project. It's for the EDA funded projects only.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification. So with that in mind, this proposed section is pretty much saying that these autonomous agency through a memorandum of agreement would agree to the terms and agreement of this line of credit, but to what extent? Are they also going to be responsible or partly responsible for payment should the central government breach their fiduciary duties to make payments on this loan, or to what extent is that binding agreement?
At this time, I know that the MOUs are being drafted and finalized, so I cannot comment as to what the final provisions are, but we can share what has been drafted so far so that you can see the details of those provisions of the MOU.
Is the intent to get them to also be binded for payment, or just
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, to ensure payment. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That's all I have for now, Chair. I yield.
Thank you. Any other members? I recognize Senate President.
Okay, so I'm not looking at a hard copy right now, and I can't really see the screen with respect to the autonomous agencies, but I understand clearly what the central government has the authority over these projects that are funded by EDA, whether they're autonomous agencies or not. That's clear. Considering that it is the expenditure authority as a state grantee for those federal grant monies, correct? Just for purposes of conversation, to stay on the issue on autonomous agencies, is this particular language proposing to allow other autonomous agencies to also be able to borrow money from MPOT and enter into a separate agreement? I'm talking futuristically speaking right now, not at the current conversation, for respect to the existing $100 million federal grants that are approved by EDA. Is that what the proposed language is?
Yeah, if I could, as far as MPLT is concerned, that would be no. What we're considering at this point is a loan directly with the administration at this point, and then what the administration does with their obligation or their funds once they do the drawdown, that would be between them and other entities. As far as MPLT is concerned, we are more concerned about the credit worthiness, of course, as well as the ability to recapture any default. And that's the main reason why you are all seeing the legislation again, is the original language to withhold future interest income was removed. And then we did our due diligence. We did our best. We worked with close to a month, maybe more, with the administration to kind of work out the details to figure out whether we could assign more collateral other than just a signature. And the reason why MPLT needs that is because we've had previous loan agreements with the government that have previous credit-worthy analysis, so to speak, and each one of those had an ability for MPLT to withhold future distribution. So from a financial analyst standpoint, when you're reviewing that type of investment, it looks like a U.S. bond, right? It's full faith and credit of the state government. We have 100% withholding authority, so it almost acts like a U.S. Treasury. And at that point, that yield would have to be equal to that U.S. Treasury, because as a fiduciary, we have to look at not only investing in the CNMI, but what is available internationally, what is available domestically. So if we are presented with an opportunity to invest here in the CNMI, we have to look at what that looks like and compare it to the rest of the world. And when we make that investment, we need to be able to describe or explain why we did this investment for this particular yield. And because the legislation fixed us at 5.5, and because we couldn't find any other collateral that would give us that same type of feeling as a U.S. bond, there was no way we could consider doing the loan, because this particular agreement looks dynamically different than the past. So that's why we had to come back to the legislature in order for MPLT to look at giving $100 million over LOC over the course of 7 years. We would need that to look like the previous types of agreements. If it doesn't look like the previous agreements, then we have to assign a different risk profile. And when we do that, the investor thereby is more risky, and then we have to higher the yield. So you'd be looking at a yield north of 8.5%, 9%, 10% for the CNMI government, with no 100% guarantee of payment. So that's kind of where we're at. If this legislation goes through, we're very confident that we can proceed immediately with the general fund and the administration, only because we've had previous track record history with them. They're a performing payer. We haven't had issues with them before. And it's a good investment for MPLT. The last couple of investments were yielding us 7.5%. So it's something that MPLT, when we make that investment, we have an actual good return on that investment for our beneficiary. So what the administration does after we give them the LOC approval, it would be up to them and their MOUs directly with those agencies they're going to deal with. And we've been in meetings, MPLT has been in meetings with the autonomous agencies, and, not to speak on behalf of them, but they seemed pretty confident that they didn't need any advances right away. They seem to be able to be paying for their A&E right away. The only concern that they have, likewise with the administration, is when they start making these large payments for construction that are in the tunes of millions of dollars, that would obviously put some stress on any cash flow situation for any entity. So that's why they're leaning on MPLT for the short line of credit so that we could give them the money, they could pay the vendor, they could submit for reimbursement from EDA, the EDA would pay them back, and then they would pay MPLT back, and then we would just repeat the process over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you for that extended clarification. I do appreciate the opportunity for MPOT to make more money and kind of like capture that spread between the current 5.5 proposed interest rate and get that 8.5% on a bond yield, right? That's very clear. But let me just take this conversation a little bit back to the time when MPOT had requested for me to have a meeting with them. I believe that was on early part of January or second week of January. And the reason why we're here today is because at that time period, when the public law was already been implemented and negotiations were going through for the agreement for the drawdown of the line of credit, that there is a standstill, meaning MPOT had requested for a sweep account, which the administration did not agree to. Initially, it was a co-signator on the federal grant account that comes down from a drawdown of federal grant monies into the central government's federal account. And then the administration would not agree to that initially. And then MPOT made an offering of how about opening another sweep account to move this money that we draw down from EDA into this other sweep account. And the administration does not want to either. And so that's the reason why we're here today on the repeal and reenactment of the legislation. But I'd like to hear from the administration the reason for the refusal of not opening another sweep account for that particular purpose of drawing down from the line of credit so that you could have a clean wash as you draw down, you pay it off, and then you draw down again. You may proceed.
Thank you, Senate President, for that question and the opportunity to clarify the discussions that have been ongoing regarding the sweep account. And this was an item that we were open to. It was not something that we outright refused. It was something that we were open to discussion and in reviewing the provisions of what the sweep account would entail, we had some concerns and made some alternative proposals based on the goal that we are trying to achieve, which is what I would assume was accountability on the funds that were being provided to the central government and the funds that were coming in to make the repayment. And so so again, I'd like to reiterate that there is no issue with the sweep account. There will be no issue in opening a new account for this transactions to occur. There's no issue with that. The only issue that we had was the co-signatory for MPLT to be a co-signatory on the account. And the reason is it would cause an administrative delay on our part in processing payment. What that means is Department of Finance, through the Treasury Division, we conduct our transactions electronically, bank transfers. You cannot do that when you have a co-signatory on the account. It then becomes a manual process that you have to walk in because both signatures have to be provided before any bank transfer can occur. And so when that concern was brought up by our treasurer, an alternate proposal was provided to MPLT through our legal counsel that maybe another way we can do this is for you to have a view-only access of the account. So the account would be established. You will have access to view the transactions and everything that's happening on the account. We only ask that you don't have co-signatory access because it would delay our transactions. And on top of that, the CNMI or the projects would be paying interest compounded daily. So every day matters to us on our side of transactions. And so that was the only issue that we had. And if MPLT would agree to have view-only access, we could move forward with the sweep account. There is no issue creating a new account. So if that were to be part of the final agreement, to open up a separate account. It doesn't have to be named sweep account. It could be the MPLT line of credit account. Yes, MPLT can have view access. That is fine. They can download statements. That is fine. The only thing that we cannot allow is, or that we cannot accept, is having them as co-signatories because of the delay. I'd also like to add for the request to be on the federal account, we had a meeting with EDA where that was directly posed to them. The question was posed to them, can the deposit be made directly to MPLT? And the answer was no. Because then MPLT would have to be a co-grantee, and that is not what they're looking for. And so again, then the discussion moved towards the sweep account. Yes, that's fine, but then there's some concerns that we have. Every day matters to us. What the discussions entailed was once we receive the funding from MPLT, right away we need to make the payment to the vendor, get the proof of payment, send it over to the EDA so that the reimbursement can come in within a couple days to reduce the amount of interest that we would be paying that is compounded daily. And so those were the kind of discussions that the Department of Finance was having with our legal counsel, just to clarify those things. But I guess it never made it to, it brought us to where we are today. So I'd just like to clarify again that there is no problem with the sweep account. We intend to have that since it would help reassure both parties and all entities of the money that is moving for specific payments that are based on drawdown packages. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. That was a perfect explanation, and I really appreciate that. At this juncture, I see that there's that opportunity for MPOT to agree to a view-only access for the sweep account, which is, I see Mr. Chairman is shaking his head, but I tell you, Mr. Chairman, I do like the idea too of capturing that 3% spread, of making that extra money and putting that icing on the cake to become thicker and have a better yield on the bond. So I do get that too, and I like that idea. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senate President. I recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I guess let me pose the question to MPOT. You're shaking your head, but I would like to know why. Why do you not? What are the concerns that MPOT has with regards to the viewing access only?
Yeah, viewing wouldn't be a form of collateral. So that
I see.
changes the risk profile of the portfolio or the investment we're looking at. So in any type of investment, we have to look at the serviceability of the client, how, what my dividend's going to be or how they would be able to pay us back. And if there's more to offer from the other side, saying you could have receivables, you could have additional land, you could have this and that, of course, that lowers the threshold to the risk profile. If, for instance, when we have the full faith and credit as well as the withholding of distribution, that changes the whole risk profile to be near zero, right? So risk-free form bond, which was the U.S. Treasury, which is where we want to get to the 5.5%. If the administration can only do a view only, that doesn't give us any capture authority or holding authority of those funds, which then doesn't give me any collateral, which then raises the yield. And the Senate President does bring this up, is that if there is no collateral in this, we wouldn't be able to proceed because the risk profile doesn't match the yield, and the legislation mandates us to be at 5.5. So we originally spoke to the administration about that, saying, okay, well, let's start with a tiered interest rate. Let's start at 8.5, then go to 8, then go to 7.5 and 7, and so on, to get us down to the 5.5%. However, the AG came back and said, no, it's 5.5. You cannot start at 8.5. So then that's why we said, okay, well, let's look at different forms of other collateral. Help us make it look like what we've done in the past so that we can keep this loan agreement in place. We were both working very hard to try and get us there, but we just couldn't get to the point where fiduciarily we can continue with this type of profile with the mandate that the legislation is giving us.
Okay, well, geez, I have so many things running in my head right now, a lot of questions, just based on the things that you've said. So first, why? Okay, so I understand that the AG says you cannot start at 8.5. What was the rationale behind that? Why couldn't we do the tier? Was there an explanation why?
Yeah, the legislation sets it at
Oh,
5.5. The
okay.
legislation that was passed, yeah.
Okay, got it. So if we were to amend the legislation and allow for that, would that be considered, would that kind of fix the problem?
It would in a way. However, I would ask that the legislature just leave the interest rate silent. Because anytime the legislature mandates a fiduciary on a particular yield, it becomes a little bit of a risky situation. The fiduciaries have to actually make the decision as a trustee what that risk profile should be and what is it equal to in the U.S. sector. Because as some of the members here spoke in the public, they're holding us to that standard. And the question would be, why did you make an investment in the CNMI versus buying a Bank of New York corporate single A bond
Sure.
that yields at 7%? The risk profiles threshold is lesser than the CNMI, and you're only charging the CNMI 6%, right? So that's where we have to be very careful in the way we do things, and just make sure that when we go through the process of the due diligence of looking at the opportunity, we say, okay, this looks like this looks like that. So then the yield should be about the same. So I would ask, if you do address that issue, please leave the interest rate silent and allow MPLT to negotiate directly with the administration on that behalf, based on what they're willing to offer us in a form of collateral to securitize the LOC.
Thank you for that explanation. And I do understand where you're coming from. I am concerned if we leave the interest rate silent on the legislation itself. I'm not sure how the administration will feel about that being silent. And I know you just said that that's something that could be discussed and agreed upon in the actual execution of the contract, right? So I will leave that to the two parties to decide on it. But what if the administration is not in agreement with the viewing access only? What are the alternatives in order to move this bill forward?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And again, my response earlier was based on my assumption that the sweep account was for accountability purposes. And that's why our alternative solution was to provide view-only access, which is still on the table.
Sure.
But like I can see from the chairman's comments, is that collateral is also one of their goals there. And so I just also like to remind this body that each drawdown is pre-approved by EDA. It provides a guarantee that this payment will be provided to the CNMI within the time frame of the drawdown process. And so that's one form of security on each amount that we will be requesting. So additional collateral, of course, is now that's on the table, is the interest income and withholding that. I don't have any issues with that. And so, again, this is not just only a discussion about the yield, but also the investment, the infrastructure that will be built in the CNMI. It's a guarantee that the project will be built. So I'd like to add that on as well.
So you talked about the pre-approval payment. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that and help us understand the process that it would take to get to the prepayment approval?
We actually created this flow chart that would help document and provide guidance for all the project managers with the EDA projects on how to prepare their drawdown packages and how the entire process would flow before it even gets to MPLT for the request, to make sure that the package is complete, that the package has been pre-approved by EDA. EDA has been in these discussions and approved of the flow chart. They agree that this is the best way to expedite the approval of the funds. And so we put a lot of time and effort into making sure that questions, any concerns were resolved to get that pre-approval. This is not the normal processing for EDA. This presents more work for them to do a
Okay.
pre-approval and then the actual approval process, but they're willing to work with us to make sure that we get that assurance to MPLT before the drawdown is received from MPLT. We can provide you a copy of the flow chart that has been developed to date.
Yes, please.
It's color-coded to
Thank you.
help us identify who and what agency in the process that has the drawdown package.
Okay, so what you're essentially saying is that EDA has been in this discussions and you have their buy-in and support in the flow chart and how the payments will be requested.
Yes.
Right, okay. And then, okay, so that's good. You also talked about, you talked to the bank and because they are asking to be a co-signator on the account. And according to you, the bank said, no, they cannot do that. Is that a requirement from all the banks across the island or just one bank or like how many banks?
We use one bank, Bank of Guam, to process all our checks through our federal checking account. We don't need to go to the bank. We have our treasurer that has experience in co-signatories on certain bank accounts, and that is the procedure that has been provided to us on
Okay.
how to authorize funds. And so based on what our treasurer had informed us during our discussions, that was the basis of why we offered the view-only access.
Got it.
Yep.
So the preference is to just stay with one bank and not try to or consider other banking institutions.
Yes.
Okay. And then you talk. So you also talked about that it would only take a couple of days for the reimbursement to occur, right? So you submit the request to MPLT for an amount that's already been pre-approved by EDA. They provide you with a drawdown. You take that money, you pay your vendors, then you turn around and submit the proof of payment to EDA so that they can reimburse you, and that would take about a couple of days turnaround time.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. Are you, Chair?
Thank you. Just along those line of questions, have we requested for reimbursement already for some of the projects? And if so, what is the longest time for EDA to reimburse these payments?
In the past, we've seen that initial drawdowns take about 3 to 5 days. That's the standard. Because EDA had a project officer stationed here in Saipan, and he is still assigned to our project, so that helps speed up the communications and the approvals. We did recently issue a drawdown request that took a little bit longer, but that's because one, EDA was going through a system change. Two, it was during the holiday season, and they did acknowledge that a lot of their staff were on leave, but it was unusual and it's not the standard. And so we were advised that the standard processing time is 3 to 5 days upon approval to receive the funds. That is why this process that we developed pushes the burden on the CNMI to make sure that everything is in place for the drawdown package to be approved quickly. And EDA was willing to be part of that process to give a pre-approval. So when it does reach their desk, we can stay within the 3 to 5 days of receiving the funds from MPLT.
Okay. Now, I assume both parties received the draft proposal. Chairman Long, is that something that you had a copy of prior to submitting your recommendations, which includes the language on including any Rhode Antonian future EDA projects? Is that the version that you have, Chairman Long?
Yes.
Are there any concerns as to the proposed amendments that was provided to you,
We would just
excluding what you already provided late last night? So prior to that, are there any concerns with what was being proposed?
No concerns from us. Again, we would review any proposal from the municipality of Rhoda and Tinian the same way we would do with the administration. And then if it has the full faith and credit of the legislature and the government, as well as our ability to withhold future distributions, I don't think MPLT would have any issues going forward with that. However, we would ask that the language be consistent throughout the bill. So when it says, section 2, the first paragraph, when it authorizes the debt, that perhaps it would authorize the debt to the governor as well as the municipalities. And then just carry that language throughout the bill that, anytime you mention the governor, you mention the municipalities, just so it's clear from our legal counsel point of view, that we can actually enter into an agreement with the municipalities as authorized by the legislature. Because at this point, it says only the governor is authorized to enter into an agreement with us.
Thank you. Secretary, any comments on the proposal that was shared with you?
No comment at this time.
Is this something that the administration would support and that it would provide funding to future EDA projects on the municipalities?
I believe so. This looks like, we yes.
That's something that the administration is amenable to. Yes. And now with the proposed language that we just got this afternoon, which is what, if members are following along, it's the new sections that were added, section K and L. Secretary, do you have a copy of that with you?
I have the HS1 and I have the HS1 SD1.
It will be on the SD one, the one highlighted in blue, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, section K and L. Sure. While you're getting caught up, Secretary, I recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This is for MPLT. So just clarifications. I believe earlier you had stated that the proposed legislation up here that's highlighted in blue was given to you last night by Senator Jude.
No, actually, that's our response back to the senator. So that we added K and L.
Okay, so you added it, and
Correct.
okay, I'm just clarifying
So-
because I thought I heard you say we just received this last night from Senator Jude. So my question was going to be, if this is an MPLT recommendation, why was it coming from Senator Jude? But you just clarified that you gave the additional amendments to Senator Jude. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. What we did is I sent him a text message asking him, hey, I'm attending this hearing tomorrow and I don't have anything to look at. I don't know what we're talking about. Can you send me any draft that you guys are working on? So he sent it over, the draft, and then I sent it immediately to our legal counsel and I had him add the language that we would like to propose. So then I sent it back to Jude
Got
to
it.
say, hey,
So prior to him when he sent this to you, it didn't have sections K and L.
no, ma'am, we offered that as amendment.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any other members? I recognize Senate President.
A question to the Secretary of Finance. I know that we had raised the issue before on public debt, And I believe the last valuation of the CNMI was 2014 census data of about 1,500 million valuation. And in totality, let's just say also to include today the $15 million revolving line of credit, what is the current outstanding debt of the CNMI government in comparison to the last 2014 land valuation report of $1.5 billion?
Thank you, Senate President. I don't have that exact amount with me right now, but we can get that information to you on the total outstanding debt.
Okay, thank you. And just for the purpose of raising this question, in the interest of the public, just to measure the public debt of the current discussion of $15 million of revolving line of credit with MPOT, based on the $1.5 billion within the Constitution limitation of no more than 10% aggregate of the total land valuation, that would put us up on a threshold of about 150 million in terms of 10% public debt allowability. And we take it down on the current $15 million of the current discussion of the revolving line of credit. That's only 10% of the 150 million that is allowable for the CNMI government to float any public debt based on the 2014 census data public land valuation. Just so that we make that clear to those that are interested in understanding the mathematical calculation between the public debt versus current land valuation. So I would assume that, considering that we do not have a current land valuation study done with that last ITB that was never completed, that we're still standing on the 2014 census report of $1.5 billion. That's our market valuation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senate President. Any other member? If none, Secretary, I know this is new information, and this is something I think you would need to take to the legal counsel. And this is also something for the members to look over, as again, it is something that we were just made aware of when we first started this meeting. And so before we excuse our participants today, I would like to recognize our fiscal analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to address this question first to Secretary of Finance. With respect to the 5.5% interest, at what point would the interest income to be recognized in terms of a drawdown from MPLT? For example, when MPLT prepares a drawdown for the Department of Finance, at what point would the interest start to kick in? Is it from the date when the drawdown takes place, or 30 days after the drawdown takes place? Just want to clarify that.
In the discussions that we had, it would be effective on the date of disbursement. And so the daily compounding of the 5.5 would commence on the date of disbursement. The date of the disbursement from MPLT to the CNMI when we receive the funds.
That would be the date of the drawdown. Is that correct? Okay, and then my next question.
So the interest expense would vary based on the amount that is requested for each project. And so because the terms of the interest on the amount that is drawn down was an ongoing discussion, it is definitely something that we've shared with the project managers, because they have to prepare their grants for reprogramming for the amount that would be charged. So yes, we we are anticipating that amount for each grant project. We have created a template calculator for each project manager to use to anticipate how much would be charged to their specific project. And that's the mechanism that we've developed so far on how the interest would be paid.
You have a ballpark number as to how much do we expect to get for the next 7 years in total? And perhaps maybe Chairman Long can answer that question. On your part, it would be the same equation, right? In your part would be an investment income. So for the next 7 years, how much under this facility would MPOT generate on the investment income?
It's hard to say right now on
Yeah,
the
yeah, but,
spot. We can project an amount. However, because there's a 30-day repayment period and it varies and it's a daily compounding of interest, it really does vary. And so, but we can definitely project. But then again, I don't know how accurate that would be based on the actual repayment period, the actual amount of days that it takes to pay back MPLT. But that's definitely something that we can calculate.
Sorry, Dave, is your mic on? Or?
We're dealing here with over 98 million some projects, right? How much do we expect to get on the revenue side of the Sinmay government by the next 7 years from today on a fiscal basis? How much do we expect to generate on taxes alone, like on BGRT tax, excess tax, salary and wages tax, corporate tax, and so forth? Have you done an analysis as to how much revenue we expect to generate for the next 7 years on these projects?
Again, that varies based on the progress of the project, the amount of work that's being done, the amount of revenue that's going to be generated by each project in itself. And so, and right now, the only thing that we can project based on is the business gross revenue tax. I know there is the construction tax that is before the Senate to consider. And so for a ballpark figure, it would be 5% of all construction activity that would be generated by these projects.
Sorry, Dave, your mic, please.
Mr. Long,
Mr. Chair,
I
just for decorum purposes, I think that the question should be coming from the senators.
Just clarification. I'll provide the leeway. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Long, I would like to see what's the opportunity cost in this facility that you are building into in terms of investing the money of this 15 million revolving fund in the market with a same risk and higher profit. How much is the opportunity cost you were talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question that we've gone over and over in debating with the trustees. Is we have to evaluate what this particular investment looks like, and then find a similar partner either in the U.S. market or in the international market. And the opportunity cost, as you put it, is should we invest in the CNMI loan versus putting that money in the U.S. market? Do we actually end up losing money for chasing this particular opportunity? So we've met with our investment advisors as well, and that's where they came up with the yield of having to be north of 8.5%. So we are looking at an opportunity cost of 2.5 basis points, 2.5. 250 basis points, 2.5%. If the existing legislation stays as it is, if you amend it, then that gives us an opportunity benefit on our side. So instead of MPLT investing it in a U.S. Treasury that yields at 3%, we are going to invest in the CNMI, bring our money home, and yield 5.5%. So we actually have a better return by bringing the money home. And then to your question to Tracy, just a short calculation, for every $1 million that we would loan to the government, the charge would be about $150 a day in yield. So for every 1 million, it'd be $150 charge daily. So that's not a lot of money for what MPLT would be doing for the CNMI government in order to bring an additional 100 million to the Commonwealth for economic development. But if this legislation is not amended, MPLT is going to be put in a very tenuous spot to where we would not be able to enter into an agreement with the administration because we're locked at the 5.5%. Exactly what you had mentioned is the opportunity cost of proceeding with this particular loan that pins us at 5.5, but has a much larger risk profile than a U.S. Treasury. So you're exactly on point in pointing that out, that there would be a significant opportunity loss.
I recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So let's establish, so we have a 30-day window to repay back the drawdown, correct? According to the proposed legislation. And we have a 2-day turnaround time to get reimbursed from EDA. How does the central government plan to proceed when the money is received from the reimbursement? Since it only takes 2 days, but you have 30 days to repay back the loan, what are the plans for the central government with that money when it's received?
It would definitely be to repay MPLT as soon as possible, because every day, again, like the chairman said,
Sure.
costs money, not just to the CNMI, but to the projects themselves. And we want every dollar to go towards the construction and completion of the project. So it makes sense for us to keep the interest costs down so that we can focus on the project. So
there are no plans to take that money and open up an account that has an interest-bearing account that would yield.
no.
Okay, just want to clarify that. And by the way, I mean, because it would cost $4.5 million at $150 per day. And if you wait until the full 30 days to repay back the loan. So just so that you know. And then I guess it would be in the best interest for MPLT's investment if they had wait for the 30 days, right? Because that's more than, I would think that's more than the 5% that's recommended on the bill. So, but I'm glad to hear that the government plans to take that money once it's reimbursed and pay back MPLT as soon as possible to reduce the interest expense. And then I don't know if we did talk about it, or I just didn't hear it, but was there a proposal or proposed alternative from the administration for MPLT to consider as far as the collateral or the assurance that they would get the repayment back? And is there, well, let me let you answer that first. Because right now, the way I see it is that you guys are at a standstill. You're willing to open a sweep account, but with viewing rights only. MPLT is not willing to accept that offer. So what is the alternative offer?
The alternative, I believe, is a withholding of interest income, which we are okay with.
Okay. And the next question would be to MPLT, or maybe just both. Has there been any discussion as to any caps or limits to the drawdown? I mean, I understand where MPLT is willing to extend a line of credit of 15 million, but does that mean that the central government can submit a drawdown of 15 million at once, or, there are limitations and caps to the drawdowns?
I believe the only limitation is the limit of the line of credit, which, like you said, is 15 million. But there is also a provision that the drawdown has to be repaid before the next
Sure.
drawdown can be processed, and so that's the control that's in place.
Got it. Is that the understanding of MPLT? Or is that the stance of MPLT? Like they can do a one-time drawdown of 15 million.
Not in the current legislation, right? So we had actually, in our agreement, we had proposed a limit of drawdown because we were lacking collateral and because it was a much higher risk profile. Should this legislature give back the withholding authority, then we wouldn't have to have any limits
Any
on
reservations
any
then?
reservations
Okay.
on the drawdown.
So with the interest income being with, if there is an agreement for MPLT to withhold the interest income, then there will be no caps per drawdown.
Not in our point of view at the
Okay.
moment. Yeah.
Okay, I just go ahead.
And I'd like to ask that we are working closely with MPLT on our projected drawdown schedule, right? So that we are open and transparent about each project that is benefiting from this LOC. MPLT gets to review the entire drawdown package that has been pre-approved by EDA. And so we aren't anticipating to submit a simple request that draws the entire 15 million. It has to be substantiated
Got it.
by the project cost, which then must be pre-approved by EDA
Sure.
and then again approved by MPLT. So there are all those internal checks before the drawdown is even approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry, I just have to ask this question because I look over there and I see Miss Liana there, and she had made a point earlier that that MPOT is not the place to request for this loan, but CETA. So was there a reason? First of all, I guess, was CETA considered as an institution to request for a loan or a line of credit?
I can't comment as to whether discussions were had that I wasn't present, but I do know that this is something that the governor proposed as an initiative, and so we are here supporting that initiative. Should the governor seek other financing sources, then we would again support that.
As the Secretary of Finance, what would you recommend?
I would recommend this avenue because it's already a moving initiative. We've spent a lot of time already in discussions. We've developed processes and procedures. We've included EDA. And so we are in the interest of moving the projects forward.
Sure.
Every day counts for our vendors, our contractors. We just want to move the projects forward. And so to restart and look for another financing source, if we must, then we must. But here we are with an opportunity to move forward. We are so close. And so this would be the avenue that we would support.
Thank you. And I completely understand where you're coming from. I just wanted to make sure that the constituents out there who are listening and who are asking the very same question that Ms. Liana was asking, had this, if we weren't in this process right now, I understand the moving forward, but if we weren't in this process right now, had other institutions be considered aside from MPOT? And I would think that the governor would come to you as his Secretary of Finance to provide him with guidance and recommendations as to what options he has to obtain such a line of credit, huge amount of line of credit, right? And that's why I posed that question to you, whether or not this is something that you would have recommended. But I understand what you're saying, that we have to move forward. But I don't want to discount a question or a concern that has been raised, not just by Ms. Liana here, but by other members of the community. So thank you. You, Chair.
Thank you, Vice. Recognize Senator King Neighbor.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a hypothetical for Chairman Blanc. If MPLT was to dissolve, who would the money or all of the assets go to? Would it go to the NMDs? Would it go to how would that work?
Under the current constitution, I would assume it would go to the general fund because that's our beneficiary by constitution. Now, as trustees, I have personal feelings on how that should work, but I'm bound by the Constitution and the way it directs us to do things. For the record, MPLT will be doing a village outreach here starting in March, just to hear from the constituency on, what their opinion is of MPLT, what do they think of it, what should it be in the future, and then we plan to prepare a report to the legislature based on our findings from the beneficiaries through the legislature, through their appropriation on how MPLT should be or how should it change. But to your question, my unlegal opinion, just because of the Constitution, is that if we were to cease to exist tomorrow, all assets would be remitted to the general fund because that's where all our interest income goes at this point. A point of clarification as well is when we're talking about interest rates and the yield that we charge the general fund, 100% of that is given back to the general fund the following year. By constitution, we're required. So even if the yield were 20%, Tracy, in effect, would receive that next year back as a interest income on that type of investment. And then in regard to Senator Mgotna's comment, I just wanted to, for the record, to let everybody know MPLT actually has a asset class called diversified local investments, as well as we have equities, fixed income, alternative investments. We actually have an asset class called direct local investment, and that's so similar to in the US, they have what's called ESG investment. They have SRI, social responsible investing. For us, it's DLI, to where we take a portion of our entire portfolio and look at a way to bring it back home and invest it here to find a favorable return here. So, with Tracy looking for ways to help the administration and MPLT actually having an investment vehicle for that purpose, I think that's why we were the lowest hanging fruit with that, as well as we have liquidity, pure liquidity. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator King Neighbors. All right. Before we dismiss our participants, I just have one last question for you, Chairman. Based on the proposed amendments you offered and everything else that was included when it was shared with you, is this a legislation that MPT can move forward with everything that's left in it?
Yes, if of course you took my verbal testimony to add the municipalities in all the pertinent language where it mentions the governor, that would help us out, at least clarity if we were to proceed with the municipality of Rota, to proceed with the municipality of Tinian and Aguiguan, that we have legislative clarity that they're telling us we can do so.
Okay, thank you. Secretary, can we call you back in at 2:30 p.m. tomorrow to inform the committee if this is something that the administration is also willing to move forward with, based on the additional information that we've received today? In that case, Chairman Long and Ms. Balahaja, you are hereby excused from today's committee meeting, and we appreciate your presence here. And again, we thank you for coming in short notice and informing the members today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And which means, Secretary, we'll be seeing you back at 2:30 tomorrow. And with that, members, we will be in recess until tomorrow, January 26th, 2:30 p.m.